I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian, and welcome to The Sidebar, a weekly show on the community, arts, culture, and more. Today we're talking to Howard Stovall about the Mighty Roots Festival, so stay with us for a conversation with Howard, and a special thanks to our sponsor, Trezevant Manor. Howard, how are you?
I'm great. It's good to be with you again.
I think it was a year ago that we talked for this will be the fourth Mighty Roots Festival.
The fourth festival.
Yeah. So quickly, and then we'll talk a bunch, but you're in an elevator, you got 30 seconds. What is Mighty Roots Festival?
Mighty Roots is a roots festival encompassing a variety of genres, not focused on blues, done in the birthplace of the blues in a very chill and relaxed setting, curated to be of interest to college students and casual music fans of a certain age.
That was really good. That was really good. Have you been doing this a lot, like promoting a lot lately?
No, I really felt like I was on the spot there. That really tested.
No, but that is really good. And just logistically, September 13th and 14th, Friday and Saturday.
Yes.
Stovall, Mississippi.
Which is right outside of Clarksdale, so 70 miles south of Memphis, hour and 20 minutes door to door.
Now let's talk about some of the bands that'll be there.
You know, we've really caught lightning in a bottle this year. And I don't expect people really our age to necessarily think of these bands as household names. But our headliner is a band out of Florida called Flip Turn. And Flip Turn is a band that had some great momentum in January when we booked them, and they have just blown up since then. West Coast tour, East Coast tour. They're out with the Revivalists in August, really, really making a name for themselves. I like to think that we bought them cheaper than anybody that came after us. But they're the kind of band that, is not going to be in this area at all. And we really sort of expected them to maybe make an Oxford run in the spring. They didn't. So it's a band that is getting a much higher profile day to day, and a band that we're going to be the only place to see them. And so we really think we're going to motivate a lot of the college crowds around that. The great thing about the band is the music that they play is got that little of Americana undertone. It's got that little twanginess to it. It's really listenable. And that's what we want is, success for me, for a lot of our ticket buyers, is people that come out and say, I didn't know any of the bands on that stage and I loved everything I heard. Yeah. It's sort of, Live at the Garden does it better than anybody, right? Sell out your tables before you announce your lineup. We're trying to create that kind of experience where the bands will drive a certain segment, but the experience drives the rest.
Let's do a few more bands and talk a bunch more about the experience, because it's more than just standing with a beer and watching these musicians. But again, Mighty Roots Festival, a couple other bands. There are a bunch of them over the course of the weekend.
We've got a duo out of Atlanta called Hey Nothing that is now starting to really be a sort of musician. We're seeing them really gain a ton of momentum, and I'm hearing actually from other musicians on the festival how excited they are. This is a duo basically out of high school that is just really writing some great stuff. Really, really fun songs. Happy Landing is a band with Oxford roots. They are they're an Ole Miss grad band. We feel like they'll be really popular with motivating the Oxford crowd. Easy Honey is a band that actually includes a couple of MUS guys. So we have a good Memphis connection there. This is another, I call them SEC bands. They really tour the college circuit in our area of the world a lot. Band out of North Carolina called Dog Park. That was kind of an also, just throw them in kind of thing. And they really are a great band. They're starting to move into bigger rooms, do bigger things. And then Hans Williams, who we have on Saturday, is really just one of the greatest singer-songwriters of this younger generation right now. It's a Tulane kid, actually met him when he was in college. It'll be his second year on the show. We really kind of hitched our wagon to him. He's just a great, great entertainer. He's got over 1 million Spotify monthly listeners, but his following in this part of the world is not that strong. And so he's one of those acts that we really want to introduce to people and say, hey, you may not have heard of this guy, but a lot of other people have.
And we'll talk more, we'll circle back to some of the other acts, but people can look at Mighty Roots Festival, just Google it, or I think Mighty Roots Festival.
MightyRootsFestival.com.
There we go, easy to remember. Talk now about the kind of, we were talking before as well, about it's not sort of everybody crowd. Your vision is not to crowd everybody in as tightly as possible with a bunch of beer and get really hot and scream and yell and kind of fight to hear the music, which there's nothing wrong with that. Like I was looking at, Lollapalooza, and there was the video of that, and maybe it's my age, and there was like 300,000 people in Grant Park, and I looked at it, I was like, that's so cool, I wouldn't do that if you paid me. I have no interest in that. But different people want different kind of concert and festival experiences. Yours is what?
And I think the word experience is what is it has to be kind of that surround sound thing. I mean, it's not just enough to throw a bunch of bands on stage, especially the bands that we're bringing that aren't household names. We want to have a chill vibe, a convivial experience, not a shoulder to shoulder packed house. I mean, even in our most robust sellout vision, we're a 2,500 person festival. We're under shade. We're hanging out. We're socializing in the back, and put the young kids up by the stage. We have this great historic site. It's an old cotton gin development, old pole barn from the 1920s, old log cabin barn from the 1840s, a gin that ran until the late 20th century. And it has this great historic vibe. It's also the farm where Muddy Waters grew up. So there is a great link to music here. And what we want is people to kind of soak that in, but it took us 3 years to explain to people we're not a blues festival, because that's what they expect in the Mississippi
Right.
Delta.
Right.
We're kind of extending what started as blues tourism in the early 90s into sort of a different music fan. So the idea is come down, spend the afternoon, spend the evening. We shut down the main stage at 10:30 because we realized we're an hour away from everywhere, which allows people to get back. We also have late jam sessions that go till 3 a.m. for those who want to stay or camp or live close by. So we're really trying to make a blended experience that a casual music fan can go have a great day of music, hear some great bands they may or may not be familiar with, get home at a fairly reasonable hour, and not feel like you've been put through the ringer.
Yeah.
So for the Memphis experience is a very different experience than us. It caters to perhaps a different crowd. I don't want to say we're the anti-Memphis, but we're very different from that Memphis experience.
Well, I mean, like Music Fest this year, or whatever it's called. I'm sorry, the River Arts Fest. Riverbeat was a different experience than previous years. And I wasn't anti the previous one, but there's just a different thing in the different park, and you go to different festivals. And I think it is all concert experiences. I mean, some of the best experiences I've ever had at a concert truly are at the Orpheum. I love that venue. I love the whole vibe in there. The artists really seem to like it just because it's cool and different for a rock band or a big loud band to play in that versus an arena. Some of the best shows I've ever seen were in terrible locations like the Garden in New York. I mean, it's like you just want to close your eyes and like shut down your eyes and not remember where you are, because it's Boston Garden the same way. I saw I'm a huge Radiohead fan there. It was an amazing show, but every once I kind of look around and go, ugh.
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting part for people who are really into music. That whole vibe and the whole experience really is a big part of it,
And we extend that to the musicians. I mean, I've been producing events and festivals for other people for 25 years. And so this is the one where we finally bit off and said, we're going to do this one for ourselves. One of the things that I knew is if we make this a musician-friendly festival, if the musicians want to be here, then that helps us when we're booking the show. It helps the quality of the show. So we have really focused on, when the musicians arrive, making sure they have a very special time there. And it's already worked. I mean, even in the second and third year when I was calling to book talent, I had agents say, wait a minute, did Jamestown Revival play that last year? Oh, great. Our guys are friends with those guys. They were talking about what a great time they had. It may not mean that I get them cheaper, but it may mean that if I'm offering the same money as somebody else, they pick me because they hear that the musicians have a cool experience.
Well, I think I've gone to a lot of shows. You've gone to a ton of shows, but I've been to shows where you could tell the band was not happy to be there. Something, either whether that was an internal thing or they didn't like the vibe, they didn't like the surrounding of like just the venue, and they start talking crap about the space they're in, and that is a buzzkill for everybody, right?
But you're on the road, you're stringing dates together. I mean, it's surprising it doesn't happen more often than it does. And so what we try to do is keep them out of the Hampton Inn staring at a TV and try to give them a great day where actually we do a little catered brunch by a pool house that's all back in secret, and the bands just have a great time.
It's a tangent, but it reminds me, Ward Archer of Ward Archer of all things Memphis, the Flyer and Contemporary Media, and original Archer Malmo and Protect Our Aquifer, and but also Archer Records. I think it's Archer Records, right?
Yes, it
and
is.
He talked about how Airbnb changed the whole business of his studio in Cooper Young, because suddenly, one, it wasn't as expensive. He'd have to put people up, let's say at the Peabody, or the band would have to put themselves up at the Peabody, and then they got to drive or take a cab or an Uber back and forth to their studio in Cooper Young. He said, when we could put people in Cooper Young in a house and they could have this Cooper Young experience, walk over to the studio, totally have this Memphis experience. He said it was just so much better.
Yeah.
Because these are human beings. I mean, I've interviewed enough musicians. These are real human beings who they're, susceptible to their environment, to all those kinds of factors.
Yeah, I mean, understanding where they're coming from and trying to make them have a good landing.
Yeah. Again, we're here with Howard Stovall. The Mighty Roots Festival is September 13th and 14th. You can go to MightyRootsMusicFestival.com to get tickets.
Or MightyRootsFestival.com. Both of them will get you there.
Both of them will get there. Okay, good. My error, but you covered my error.
So you're all good.
Yeah, or you can Google, Mighty Roots Festival, Music Festival. Let's talk more about, we were talking earlier about it's very kid friendly. That's a big part of what that experience you're after.
This is all learning who your audience is. And we're in a very sparsely populated area. I mean, good Lord. I mean, agents, when you have a radius clause. So a radius clause is if I book a band, it says, okay, this band can't play within this radius of my gig for 90 days before my group so that they don't cannibalize my sales. And it's a very typical thing for touring bands. So if someone books Memphis, they'll have a radius clause. Well, a radius clause in Manhattan, is going to be a half mile. So when I say our radius clause is 75 miles, agents are like, well, how can that be? It was like, run a population density. And you'll find that, but I can't, I have to block out Memphis and Oxford. I mean, those are, they're 70 miles away, yet that's a strong feeder for us. So we're in an area where we really have to figure out how do we motivate people within 50 miles? And those, that's not densely populated at 50 miles. Well, some of the feedback we got early on was we heard from young parents who said, I can get childcare in the evening or at night, but I'd like to come out there all day. And so we quickly learned, let's make this thing kid friendly. Let's add a petting zoo, add a bouncy house. Kids under 10 are free on Saturday. And what we found is that young families could then come out and spend the afternoon with us, take the kids home, drop it with a babysitter, and come back out for the night. And that was really an evolution that was not something we anticipated. It's nice to have the room. We said, great, we can stick all this over here. And the response in the first year, last year was the first year we did. It was absolutely dramatic. And it kind of redefines who the festival is and makes it a little bit more open to a wide range of lifestyles, so to speak.
Yeah. Again, here with Howard Stovall, I'm going to take a moment here and do a little bit of housekeeping. Remind everyone, I'm Eric Barnes, and this is The Sidebar. It airs on WYXR 91.7 every Thursday at 11:30, focused on the community, arts, culture, everything in between. It's not just a radio show, though. It's one of many weekly podcasts we do at the Daily Memphian, including Bill Dree's politics podcast, On the Record, the Memphis Grizzlies podcast with Drew Hill and Chris Harrington, and our food podcast, Soundbites, that's hosted by Jennifer Chandler, a food writer who came over to us some 6 weeks ago, almost 2 months ago. And that one also airs on WYXR every Thursday at 11. We also host the podcast version of Behind the Headlines, the news program we produce with the folks at WKNO every week. All of our podcasts are on the Daily Memphian site, as well as iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. For this show, Sidebar, and for Soundbites, you can also get the show on WYXR.org or download the WYXR app. That includes all the WYXR shows, music, talk, archives, going back, many days, many shows. So you can totally stay up to date on WYXR just through the app and the archive. You should consider becoming a supporter of WYXR if you're not. It is nonprofit, listener-supported radio. Become a member, do a one-off donation. If you become a member, you get all kinds of benefits. And also, become a paid subscriber to the Daily Memphian if you're not one already. Paid subscriptions are what really supports what we do at the Daily Memphian. It is nonprofit news, local news, and the largest newsroom in the area. Coming up next week in the future on the Sidebar, which we maybe taped an hour ago, Mia Henley from Creative Aging, talking about all their arts programs and the great things they do with seniors around the city and around the community. Recently, we had Willie Bearden.
These are all great friends of mine.
Yes, I know. Yeah, Willie Bearden from he wrote his memoir, Mississippi Hippie, and growing up in Rolling Fork, not far from
right down Highway 1.
Right down Highway 1. We also had Toby Sells from the Memphis Flyer. His new book about the paranormal, mostly in Tennessee, Bigfoot sightings, all kinds of loony, crazy stuff, but it's Toby, so we love it. And we recently had Rose Smith, who is the curator of photography at the Brooks Museum of Art. You can get all those previous Sidebar episodes wherever you get your podcasts, or again, WXR or Daily Memphian. I mentioned behind the headlines this week, we've got District Attorney Frederick Agee from some of the rural Gibson, Haywood, another one, Crockett, I think, rural counties around Shelby County. He's a Republican district attorney who, one, has his own things that it'll be interesting to talk to him about in those rural areas outside Memphis, but also he is a big defender of Steve Mulray, as Steve Mulray has come under fire from the state legislators and others. So we'll talk about that as well. Tina Sullivan, who is the retiring executive director of Overland Park Conservancy. That's coming up soon. And recently we had Brent Taylor, the state senator, and Josh Spickler, criminal justice reformer from Just City, talking about criminal justice, public safety, many of the new laws that were passed. So that was a good conversation that you can get. Last thing before we get back to Howard, our small business seminar is coming up September 4th at 3:30. That'll be Beverly Robertson of Trust Marketing, and Beverly and Howard, a great run Trust Marketing for many decades, and just a great couple of people here in Memphis. They are passing that business off to their children, including Ryan Robertson will be there. We have Scott Tashi from City Silo coming, as well as Monique Williams from Biscuits and Jams. That's September 4th. You can go to the Daily Memphian site, or it's easiest, just go to Eventbrite, search Daily Memphian, and you can get tickets to that small business seminar. That was a lot of housekeeping, Howard. Thank you for your patience.
We are on Eventbrite as well.
What's that?
That's where you get our tickets.
Oh, okay. All right.
So while you're on Eventbrite, just load up the cart.
Just load up MightyRootsMusicFestival.com. We talked about kid friendly. Talk about some of the other things. People can stay there. They can camp there. They can.
Yeah, we've got dozens of campsites. The camping community, I mean, that's really critical to a rural festival. So we've really kind of explored different RV options, van camping, campsites. So there are 4 different sort of RV or campsite options on the site, and we're continuing to optimize that and to grow that community. I mean, we shut down the main stage. Our headliner will end at 10:30, and then we move the action from our big main stage into the actual old Cotton Gin building. We do a late set there, and then we move even later into our old general store that's on site, and that goes till 2, 3 in the morning. So we like the campers doing that so that nobody hops in a car. But last year we had Moon Taxi as a headliner last year. It's a great band. And at midnight, Moon Taxi is in the Stovall store doing Grateful Dead covers to a crowd measured in the dozens, and that's the really fun stuff. It's like that's. Yeah. And they had members of the Stews, which was our undercard act, in there playing with them. It's really, really fun. And then one of the things, because if you're going to do something that's very Delta, it has to have some level of overt weirdness that's ill-advised. And so what we came up with was at midnight, and it's actually evocative on our poster, we burn a big guitar effigy. So it's our little Delta Burning Man. Yeah. So, with the opportunity to use fire and diesel and poor judgment really all coalesced into this one thing. Yes. And so at midnight, we fire that up, and that, it's just a great signature moment. And it was just one of those things that we thought would be a lot of fun. The first year there were about 15 people out there, and then the next year there were about 40, and then last year we had this massive crowd out there cheering on, the burning of the guitar. And of course, we're out here in the middle of these old buildings. I mean, part of it is like, Coahoma County Volunteer Fire Department on standby to make sure that an ember doesn't go the wrong spot. Right. But yeah, it's I'm
sure your insurance underwriter is not listening to the show today, so you're good.
Let's hope not. Yeah, that one's we didn't itemize that out. But we have an artist market. We have a really well curated Delta artist market. So we have sculptors and painters and makers of neat things. And it's not just craptastic stuff. I mean, it's really
craptastic. Nice. Yeah. I love that. I'm gonna start using that word.
That's
a lot.
That's Bart Simpson. I give credit.
I don't care. I'm giving credit to you.
We have a food court with Doe's Eat Place. We have some great soul food vendors, concessionaires that do your funnel cake or your whatever. So we've got the food piece. We've got plenty of things to do if you want to take a little bit of a break. And I think it's so important in this area. The schmooze is always a big thing. And so there's always space sort of in the back of the site to sit by a bar and have a conversation while a band's playing. Listen to the band with one ear and your friend with the other. And I think that if you're going to make a festival that is accessible to everybody, that's got to be a component to it.
So you've run Resource Entertainment Group, which books bands and all that for years now, 20 years maybe?
20 years, 22.
We're involved with the start of, you were co-founder of the Ground Zero Blues Club in Clarksdale. So you've been around music and booking bands. You kind of talked about that earlier. this maybe, I don't know if anyone besides me is interested, but the economics, you don't have to tell me the dollar amounts, but the economics of a festival, how does that work? I mean, you've got tickets, you've got all this expense.
Yeah, you got three revenue silos. You got tickets, you've got F&B, and
it was food and beverage.
Food and beverage. And really for us, that's bar sales, because we're we might get to the point where we might try to participate in food vendor revenue, but I'd rather have a good partner that's making money
Gotcha.
that continues, because that adds to the experience. And then you have sponsorship, which is just absolutely critical. And because sponsorship is such a big silo in festivals, the pricing of bands tend to be different, because a lot of times when bands are looking at what they can get out of a gig, they say, okay, we're playing the high tone. They can sell X number of tickets at X number of dollars. That means there's this much money available. They got to market the show. So, there's a little bar revenue. So when you add that sponsorship piece, it actually changes the calculus a little bit for bands. So festival pricing tends to be a little firmer. Also, we need them on Fridays and Saturdays, not Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So the whole idea, and also with the festival, you're not, if I'm booking Minglewood Hall, then I'm definitely looking out in the future to get some anchor dates. But also bands are calling me saying, hey, we're going through Memphis. Would love to get a date, and maybe I can get a discount and I can do something postmodern jukebox that's interesting for the market, that doesn't have to do great. We're booking Fridays and Saturdays, and we're booking them 9 months in advance. And so we are the anchor date that the discounts get done around. So you've got to be smart. You've got to be smart in how you pick your acts. You've got to be smart in how you negotiate for your acts.
How has all that changed over 20 years?
It's really funny. The other day I was in the back of our office, and I came across a stack of padded CD envelopes. And I thought, if you called me 20 years ago and said, I need to book a band for a gala, I'm putting pieces of paper and CDs into an envelope, and I'm mailing them to you. And I mean, there was just so much physical stuff that went in with booking a band. And now, obviously, we don't do that. We provide links. It's changed the agency business. I can't sort of hide the ability to reach these bands. Oh, you've got to go through me to get to these bands. Those bands, you can go to their website. If I don't have the right relationship with that band, I have to, as their agent, I have to make sure that I'm adding value. Otherwise, they can go direct to consumer. The kind of fool with it factor skyrockets. I mean, our bands just wait for us to say, hey, this is confirmed. They don't hear about the 9 that didn't confirm. But it's also been a lesson in production. Production has changed so much. I mean, the amount of power required to power a massive stage. We do the college football national championship pregame concert. It's a massive stage. Even though it's in the middle of the day, we have massive amount of lighting. Normally that would have taken a 400 amp and a 200 amp generator, the 400 running lights, the 200 running sound. I can run the entire stage off of 200 now, because LEDs have crushed the amount of power you need. Audio's never pulled a lot of power, but you always had to keep audio power and lighting power separate, because the lights would buzz into the audio. Now, just technology has changed so much. You don't have the heat. I mean, we used to have 80 lights up, 80 lights down. The amount of heat generated by those lights was always tremendous. So it's amazing how technology has changed the marketing, it's changed the staging, it's changed everything.
And the artists make less money. I mean, they used to be able to make more money. I mean, certainly bigger artists would make so much money off CDs, and before that, album sales. Now they're making, for a band, for these bands that are coming to Mighty Roots, the bands that might be at the River, at River Arts, they're making most of the River Beat. Sorry, I just can't do it. It's like the Med. I can't call it Regional One. How are these bands that are coming to your place? How do they make money?
I'll tell you, man, the bands have always made the bulk of their money on touring. It's the one part that the record labels couldn't really dip their hand in. And all the stories of record deals that, sound great, but ultimately don't. So the touring market has been the cash cow for bands for a long, long time. There was a push a while back of what we call 360 deals, where record labels were trying to get in on the touring, on the merch, on all those things. And the bands really have done a great job of holding on to the touring environment as where they can make their money. And maybe we'll ask Ward Archer about the record label model, but I really don't understand how we did a symphonic blues album through Ground Zero that we ended up bundling under a nonprofit, simply because you just can't make. I just don't know how you make money on recordings.
Yeah.
When if I'm listening to these bands, I'm going to Spotify or I'm going to YouTube, and putting together a playlist. By the way, we have a great playlist on Spotify.
Yeah. So people can sample what
that
the bands
features
and
all
stuff.
these bands, especially if you have it's you can work out to it, you can walk to it, you can do whatever. It's a great. In fact, we went out to the bands and said, "What do you like that the other people in this festival are doing?" And we got some great feedback, and that kind of curated that list.
Yeah.
So I think the touring model is it. I mean,
Yeah.
you're basically giving the music away.
Yep. Yeah.
So this is it.
We've talked about it. We haven't this is your property, your family's property, longtime property, going back 100 and something years that this whole festival takes. Talk about the property when the Mighty Roots Music Festival is not happening there. There's a lot going on the property other times of the year.
Yeah, I mean, it's a working farm, and my family actually was the active farmers until 6 or 7 years ago, and now, but there's still, in fact, I was talking to the guy that farms right next to the site. We've always had this vision that they would be harvesting while the music is going on. I have this vision of this drone shot of the stage and the crowd and tractors right next to it, with the headlights on going up and down the field. So there so there is a lot of that. We do a little slow level of energy. We do kind of a couple of things a month out at the Stovall store that are little juke joint things. We do some ticketed events at the Gin. We've done some wedding receptions and things at the Gin. We took an area that literally had not had power or water for decades and brought it back to life and said, okay, let's take this 20 acres of completely, abandoned buildings and let's turn it into something that can generate some energy and contribute positively. I can't do much with the farmland. The farmland's being farmed. That's what farmland is. But what can we take this 20 acres, given what I know, and turn what is basically worth nothing into an asset for the region, to just another generating source of energy, and we still want to. We do want to grow this thing. We want to put some events around it.
This is a silly question with just a minute left here, but the Delta and that part of the Delta, it is this incredible amount of creativity, incredible amount of weirdness, very genuine weirdness. It's such an interestingly textured place. I mean, my sense of it as a non-Southerner, adopted Memphian, is it comes both from, there's all this creativity that obviously comes both from some of the tragedies of the Old South, but some of this just amazing amalgamation of people in the South. But you tell me your take on this.
I mean, and of course that question's been asked for years. Is it, there's something in the water? Well, there's tragedy in the history, and tragedy does create art, both by how you communicate when you're not allowed to communicate, or how you respond to this, or just finding beauty in a world that maybe is hiding it from you. The Delta has always embraced weirdness, and I think that's a positive thing for any community. Our eccentrics have been celebrated rather than hidden, and some of them have turned into great artists and writers and speakers and musicians. And those things have been treasured and encouraged. But there is no question that, in a per capita, here I am talking about how sparsely populated we are, and yet the art outpouring, literature, music, everything from that area is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
But I think you have to have at the bottom, there has to be a collision. There has to be a collision of forces. And the thing about the Delta is that people of all stripes, colors, races, creeds, socioeconomic, have always collided because there's just not enough of them to wall yourselves off in little communities. So there's always been that awareness, Elvis outside the black church, learning about music that ultimately informed rock and roll. It's those kind of cross-pollinations of microcultures have been really, I think, critically important to what we're doing. And so we're kind of doing a little version 2.0. The blues thing has been great down there. The tourism has saved Clarksdale, has great energy in Cleveland from the music scene down there. So what we've kind of said is, all right, so the blues thing is done. If we do a blues thing, I'm just slicing the pie differently. Let's bring a new music fan down here and then say, oh, by the way, 6 months from now is the Juke Joint Festival. You really ought to check that out too, because it's the blues thing.
We're about out of time. I asked you last time, but I've already forgotten. The first concert you went to?
Was Chicago. And I think it was at the Auditorium North Hall. It might have been at Mid-South Coliseum, but it was the band Chicago. I was in high school, came up from Clarksdale, big exciting trip.
That's good. Howard Stovall, again, MightyRootsMusicFestival.com. It's coming up September 13th, 14th. You can learn more and more about the bands. You can go to the website and get that Spotify playlist, the bands we mentioned and others who are going to be there for those 2 days. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you, Eric. It's always a pleasure, man.
That is all the time we have this week, though. Again, join us again next week, and thanks for listening.